since 1992.
Really?
So what's that, 25 years?
25
Yeah.
years.
I've been with the company since 1982.
Okay.
And have owned it since 1992.
All right, awesome. So what
91, 92.
What got you into journalism and news and?
Well, I was a military journalist. I was in the Army as a journalist for a 4.5-year period. And when I left there, I stayed in the field. My degree is actually in English, not journalism.
Okay.
Anything I know about journalism I learned from the U.S. Army.
Awesome. I went to college for English at first, and I saw how much reading it was.
Yes.
I chose math.
Well, you know, that's a totally different set of skills between math and English.
I know.
So, you chose math, I chose English. I can do math, but it's definitely not my preferred skill set.
Okay. So, with your role now with the Journaling Guide, tell me about what you like most about working with the community.
Working with the community and working with the Journaling Guide particularly, I think that the black press plays and has always played a very important part in unifying the community, in making it, making the community feel that it is connected to each other. It's our drum. It's the way that we relate to each other historically. And even though we live in an era where we're doing things more technologically through the internet or the web and those sorts of avenues, we still need a tool or vehicle to get our word out, to get our message out. And I think that not only that, which is very important, but also what the newspaper does for our community is that when we report on something or when we cover something in the African American press, it signals to the majority or the mainstream press that this is a story that is of interest to our community, and if they want to reach our community, then it's something that they should follow. Now, they don't always do that, of course, because their focus is not our community. Their focus is the total community. Our focus is the African American community, and to tell those stories that bring us together, to tell those stories that determine and define who we are and what the black experience is, particularly for us here in Hampton Roads. And so being a part of that, being a part of telling the story, recording the history, making sure not just for today, not just the community that you and I occupy in this year, but the community that will come after us, your grandchildren even, who will look back and say, what were they doing? What were people doing in Hampton Roads in the year 2016? What were they doing in the year 1999? Or what were they doing in the year at that point for them, maybe 2025? And to be able to look at archived copies, digital pages, internet examples of what we were talking about and how we were defining ourselves. So that's what I enjoy about the newspaper being in the community and being a community newspaper.
All right, awesome. Pause that. Can you come a little bit closer? Like, you can sit down and do it. Are there any moments or stories in our community that stand out to you the most?
Well, right now, yes, is the answer to that question. The stories that I enjoy the most, I think, are stories that show what African American people are doing as far as bettering or advancing or assuming advanced roles in our culture and in our community. Right now, for example, we're following what the area ministers are beginning to do with fighting crime and violence that is rampant, not just in our community, but throughout the country. And that kind of story is something that we see as letting our people know that we can, and not only can we do and we are very much responsible for our own destiny in many cases. And in those areas where we aren't able to achieve what it is we'd like to achieve, at least we know that we are on the track, we're on the road. I like the stories we do about youth, about education, about different kinds of ways that African American people just live, basically. Most of our stories are stories that you could find anywhere. The difference is that we tell them from the perspective of what it means to be African American. And African American people are not other people in dark skin. We have a unique culture. We have a unique way of viewing the world. And the way we view the world is not necessarily better, worse. It's just the way we view the world, and that's the stories that we like to tell.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Wow. To the future journaling guide, if you could leave them with any type of advice or leave them with any words of wisdom, what would that be?
Always tell your own story. When there's an African proverb that says something like, depending on who's telling the story about things that are happening, whether it's the animal telling the story or the human telling the story, you're going to get a different story. And that's the same thing about human stories. Who tells the story is extremely important to make sure that the truth and the authenticity of whatever the story is comes from our community. Because people see us from their perspective. We see them, whoever the them may be, from our perspective. But we see us from our perspective. And so it's always, to any future generation, always tell your own story. Always be on top of who you are, not who people identify or define who you are, but who you are. And then make sure other people know who you are through your telling of your story.
All right, awesome. And I didn't write any of the questions on the same page. Hold on 1 second. What would you like to see change in the community?
I would like to see people, Black people, develop more self-respect, more appreciation for who we are, more understanding of who we are, and such that when other people try to define who we are, we're strong in responding, strong in standing tall. I would like to see in this community an African American museum, an African American center, where people can go and can find artifacts as they relate to our culture, where they can find art, where they can find the journaling guide on microfilm or on digital files. They can go to a computer, because our newspaper is digitized, and microfilmed all the way back to 1916, although we date back to 1900. And to be able to, a place where people can come to learn more about culture, art, and the Black experience, not just in this area, yes, this area, but throughout. I'm excited about the new African American Museum that will be opening up in September in Washington, D.C. And of course, that's going to be a major project, and is a major project. But I'd like to see something in our community that we also can own our story, our place to tell our story.
Awesome. And the last question was, why do you do what you do?
That's a good question. I love what I do. I am committed to what I do. What I do is what I've done since I was about 11 or 12 years old, and that is to advocate for rightness, to advocate for the right of the African American community to have first-class citizenship. That's what I was doing when I was 11 and 12, and lived in a culture and a society that you would be totally unaware of because of your age. But I've lived long enough to have seen the end of segregation into desegregation, and so those are things that, and I lost the question as I was going on, but those are things that I would like to see.
Okay. No, it was just, why do you do what you do?
Oh, okay, thank you. Because I'm committed to doing and to being a part of the answer to the and to the fulfillment of what our ancestors started years ago. You know, it just baffles me that at the turn of the century, we were able, as a people, to do so much with so little. We started colleges, we started newspapers, we started businesses, we started churches. We were just a few generations, actually one perhaps, out of an enslaved environment. Yet we took hold of who we were, and we were beginning to move forward. Now, it didn't just happen that those things ceased. There was a deliberate movement to make them cease. We went through the lynchings, we went through the KKK, we went through some horrible hate scenes, but we come now to the 21st century, and we're still fighting some of the same battles that we've been fighting, that I was fighting as an 11 or 12-year-old, and young people today have taken up, particularly through the Black Lives Matter movement. So I want and have always wanted to be a part of the answer. And I think that the Black press is a very important part of the total scenario, because it provides the vehicle, it's the tool, it's our drum, it's the way we can communicate with each other. And I've spent most of the time in my position trying to educate people to how important it is to be able to have a voice, to be able to say that for 116 years that this is an institution that has brought us to where we are today, and has the ability to bind us together, to tell not just today's story for today, but the story for the future. And so I do what I do because I feel committed to it, and it's what I do. I do.
That's a great answer. That was actually all of the questions that I had. I didn't want to bombard you with all the questions I was going to ask you,
Yeah.
Which is about 14, 15.
Yeah, well, you know what you need, so.
Yes, we're good.
Okay.
So the way